doing? Is that really going to happen? Is the Guru going to just keep coming back until every one of their students is perfect enough?
Well, you've opened it to a few different answers, but that's not a problem, understandably so, given that there appear to be contradictory statements, perhaps. But the idea that one should not accept any disciples, I'm not sure there's a correct statement like that in Chaitanya Charitamrita, or
I don't think so.
Or
I think it's just
anywhere.
a caution, don't take many.
that is definitely, that statement is there, but it should be fairly obvious that if a statement was made to the effect that one should not accept any disciples, it's a relative statement. So all the statements of Scripture have to be taken into consideration of time, place, who they're being spoken to, and so on and so forth. And they may not apply to everybody in all circumstances. Certainly, if that was so, then there wouldn't be any disciples, there wouldn't be any gurus. No one should make any disciples. One could even say, no one should make any disciples, because the implication being you should see your disciples as your own teachers. Think of it like that. They've come to engage you, speaking about Krishna, giving you service, and so on and so forth. So even if there was a direct statement like that, there would be a need to explain it rather than in terms of what it says on its face. Just like there are different statements that will be literally on their face, the mukhya understanding is correct. And then there's the lakshan, indirect. Gona, excuse me, mukhya gona. So the classic example is, where do you live? Umikotai-take. Ami Angat Taki. I live on the, where do you live? I live on the Ganga. Oh, okay. You live on the Ganga. Well, obviously it means he lives over there near the Ganga on the shore. He's not living on the Ganga itself. Most people don't live in the middle of the river, right? So the statement obviously has to be taken rather than on its face, literally, it has to be interpreted. It's called gona. Then there's also, there's a term, vyavahara. So vyahara, implied meaning. I spoke about this a little bit the other day. So let's say a lady of questionable character wants to meet with a man of questionable character. So they make a plan for a rendezvous in the forest, and there she's waiting for him to come, and the brahmachari from the nearby temple happens to show up to pick flowers for the deity. So she says, oh, very nice, you're going to pick flowers for the deity. Don't worry about that dog that always barks here, because the lion down nearby just ate him. So she's saying one thing, but the implied meaning is what she wants to say to him is, you better get out of here. There's a lion and there's a dog just nearby and it could eat you too. So there are many layered meanings. We need good help sometimes to draw them out, what's being said and so forth. But that's it. We don't know of any direct statement that no one should make any disciples. That wouldn't make any sense. But it is one should not make too many disciples or many disciples. And that is a statement that is relative to the teacher. So the statement means a teacher has to know their own capacity. And not all teachers have the same capacity. So what may be many for one maybe few for another. You can say, no, you should not eat too much. Okay, it depends who you're talking to, how much that's going to be. If he's 6 foot, 10 and 300 pounds, maybe, it's going to be different than a 5 foot person of, 95 pounds. What it means is too much. You should not eat too much. It similarly said, over endeavor. So for mundane things, that will mean a little bit different for one person and another person. So, in these statements, we can't look at spiritual life as, okay, I'm going to turn to the book 108, page 108, all the questions are answered. They do ask you to think also. Spiritual life does seek to engage our intelligence also. Not that just to be thrown aside. We do put a caution on the limits on the intellect in terms of its capacity to know. By intellect to know alone unto itself, we can't arrive at a knowing that through which we'll feel there's nothing left to be known. That's true. It doesn't mean that intellect doesn't have a role to play. So keval yukti, or just intellectual conjecture that is not tied to revelation, which would be shastra yukti, meaning reasoning about the implications of the scriptural statements, how they might apply to one person or another at one time, place compared to another, or how they might apply in relation to another statement that has been made. It's similar, it's different. This kind of spiritual reasoning, it's called shastra yukti. This is required of us. This is what how we engage our intellect also. So it has a role to play, but unto itself alone, you're not going to think your way out of samsara. You might, as I said the other day, go as far as getting a passport, because let's say intellect is the power of discrimination. The fullest expression of that would be discriminate between that which is consciousness, that which is matter, what I am, what's out there. As I often say, who's asking the question? And understand the difference between the two. That would be a function of what we call sattva guna. As the Gita says, the symptom of sattva guna is knowledge. So this is the full measure of knowledge in this world, that there's the consciousness is an agent of action, and it's what gives value to matter and so forth. So by the exercise of one's discriminating faculty, which will function in different modes of nature, it's also, who's most intelligent? Well, it depends what mode of nature your intelligence is functioning within. You could be very intelligent, but functioning under the primary mode, the mode of passion, and you could be have a less, let's say, what they call it, IQ. I don't know if that's even considered a measure of intellect anymore, but in the sattva guna, from which you would conclude it's not worth getting too worked up about making the world completely a better place, which would be the perspective of Rajaguna, because it's temporary, and so that's a sattvic perspective. There's some impetus for just continually trying to improve the situation. Not that you forego it altogether, but improve it to the extent that I can, as much as that will facilitate my pursuing the transcendence of it. So I'm going to answer it in a very broad way here, but so statements have to be thought about. And that's what you're trying to do, and ask me about it. So one should not accept many disciples. Depends on who one has to, who's in a position to accept any disciples, has to think about that. And you can't get away from the fact that the scriptures are asking us to be honest and tell your own temperature, and a thinking person, albeit a spiritually thinking person. Now, you quoted some verses, and I'd just like to comment on them in a slightly different way. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu meets a Brahmin named Kurma, and he tells him, Yarideka Karika, Krishna Upadesh, and quoted the verse, Amaragyan Guru Mantare. So you go, he wanted to stay with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu said, no, you should go. I'm leaving, by the way. You should go out and give Krishna Upadesh, instruction about Krishna, and be a guru in this way. And there's another famous verse that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu cited in speaking with, uttered in speaking to Ramananda Roy. Right? He said, Kiva Viprakiba Nashi, Shudra Kenena, Ye Krishna Tattveta Shevurhai. So here, Ramananda Roy was from the Shudra Varna. He was a, we call him in Bengal, Kayasta. Typically it's the Shudra Varna, but they usually would take on clerical work, administrative work, something to that effect. So such was the situation for Ramananda. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was from a Brahmin family, and he was a sannyasi. And when they met, they embraced and wept. And people thought, what's this? But why these? This is from a caste perspective. How are they so intimate? Because the idea would be, well, certain people have different psychology and propensities, and they would be better to be grouped together to flourish in that way. The Kayastas over here, the Brahmins over here, and they have some interaction socially, but there were some restrictions. That was, part of the Hindu Varnashram caste system that Mahaprabhu said his teachings transcend altogether. So he said, Kiva Vipra, Kiva Nyashi, Shudra Kenanai, Ye Krishna Tattveta Shevurhai. Whether he's a Vipra, a Brahmin, Kiva Vipra, Kiva Nyashi, a sannyasi, Shudra Kenanai, or a Shudra, it doesn't matter. If he, or the implication is she, knows about Krishna, Krishna Tattva, then she's my guru. So he took it right to the transcendental platform. Now, some people, some devotees even, whose bhakti is covered by karma, which is not what Rupa Goswami teaches. He says, Gyan karmadi anavritam anukulena krishnanushivanam bhakti uttama. I'm teaching about uttam bhakti. Uttam bhakti, that's a certain type of bhakti. There are other types, sattviki bhakti. There's all types of bhakti, mixed bhakti, karma mishra bhakti, gyan mishra bhakti, yoga mishra bhakti. Mishra means mixed. Uttam bhakti. He says, he defines it, and in defining it, he says, this kind of bhakti that I'm talking about is not covered by gyan or karma. It means it's not performed like the jnanis sometimes perform karma for mukti. It is itself the means and the goal. Bhakti is performed for bhakti, for more bhakti, not for mukti. Bhakti can give mukti, but mukti can't give bhakti. Even those who want Savyuja Mukti to merge in Brahman, they say there's no bhakti there. And they're right about that. But that's not the only type of liberation. So, and karma means I don't do bhakti for improving my material situation, for liberation, or for improving my material situation. Or I don't think that as Gyan Marg is governed by Sattva Guna and Karma Marg is governed by Rajaguna, I don't think that bhakti, which is nirguna, will be improved by mixing it with karma or gyan. That means I don't think that if I don't follow the varnashram social system, my bhakti will be impaired. No, it won't. It is another path. That means that my bhakti, I'm following Rupa Goswami's Uttam Bhakti, I'm a sadhaka of that, but I don't think that if I forego the varnashram mandates in Manu Samhita and other texts that pertain to that path, varnashram, social religious path, that if I don't perform what's being said there, my bhakti will be impeded, or that if I do follow it, it will be enhanced. So some persons have an idea where they don't really understand the distinction between bhakti and varnashram. They say, for example, quoting Nyamala, Krishna Nyamala Tantra, Rupa Goswami has cited that. But what does it say? He says, Shruti Smriti Pranadi Pancharatiki Virimana Oikantiki Harayar Bhakti Rupatyaiva Kalpate. That bhakti is not according to the Shruti, Smriti, and so forth. That is a disturbance to the society. So there's the verse. You see, you have to follow the Manusmriti and so forth. But to understand the verse properly, we turn to the commentators within our own tradition. What does Jiva Goswami says? This means that those on the path of bhakti, their bhakti should be in accordance with the bhakti shastras, because that's the path they're on. Not the karma shastras governing karma or gyan. There's some overlapping, but bhakti is a distinct path. Savai pum samparo dharma, to bhakti ahoituki apratigata. It is parodharma. Oh, in Bhagavatam itself, there's a real, he speaks in uncertain terms about it. Shrama eva hi kevalam. So you follow the varnashram perfectly. But Vasudeva Kataruchi, you never got a taste for Krishna. Shrama eva hi kevalam. You wasted your time. Neither will it taste for Krishna and Raga Bhakti come from following varnashram. It's a different course. It's not a bad thing, but Bhakti is better. So, and more generous, more powerful. It's nirguna. It must be nirguna if there's a Vaikuntha, if there's Narayan, if there is Krishna, who has a form that's eternal. Then it must be, then it must move. There's Leela, right? Must be interaction. So, such is the advocacy of the Bhagavad and of course of our Gaudiya Sampradaya and other Vaishnava Sampradayas like Ramanuja, Madhava, and Bhakti, and so forth. So, the point I'm making here is that we take these two verses, Kibavi for Kibanashi and Amaragna Guru Hantare, you become Guru. Some people say, whose bhakti is covered by varnashram considerations. Yes, he could become, and only he, not you, he could become a Siksha Guru, the Kurma Brahman. Or Ramananda Roy could be the Siksha Guru of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but not the Diksha Guru. The Diksha Guru has to be, and then they're going to cite text from Varnashram, from a Brahmin family, having these qualities and so forth. Never mind verses like this. Satkarma nipuno vipro mantra tantra vishara. A Vaishnavo guru nasat. Vaishnavo swapato guru. It's from the Purana. If you have all the 6 qualities of a Brahman, but you don't have any love for Vishnu, you're not a Vaishnava, then you cannot be the Guru. But if you're born in a family that eats dogs, Swapacha, but you're a Vaishnava, then you can be a Guru. And when you quote this, that means Siksha Guru, not a Diksha Guru. Now, the point I want to make here, it's a little bit of a side from what you're asking, but it's an interesting point. The concept of shiksha, shiksha means instruction. Diksha means to impart the mantra, basically. Where does the term Siksha Guru come? Do you find it in Bhagavad Gita? No. Do you find it in the Upanishads? No. Do you find it in any Purana? No. You just find Guru, 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 the qualities of the Guru. You don't find the term. Where does this term Siksha Guru come from? Siksha Guru, Siksha Guru. It comes in Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's a totally a Gaudiya Vaishnava concept. Doesn't make it bad. Makes it good. Since we're Gaudiya Vaishnava, we can actually feel that way. But it's very practical. Very practical. But what does Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami say about the Siksha Guru? He says the difference between the Siksha Guru, the instructing Guru, and the Diksha Guru, the initiating Guru, is in terms of function. They function differently, but their spiritual standing is equal. So you cannot say he or she cannot be a Guru, a Diksha Guru, because they can only be a Siksha Guru because they have less qualification. It's only a practical function. That means to say that, well, for example, he goes on to say, you may have one Diksha Guru, but many Siksha Guru, because the mantra is one, so one gives a mantra, but many Siksha Gurus could help you, advise you, and so on and so forth. So the Siksha Guru concept is totally a Gaudiya concept. When Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, one should approach a Guru and get instruction from him, he will, what does it say? He has seen the truth. What's that verse? He's a Tattvadarshi. Doesn't say, oh, I meant to say the Diksha Guru. You can get it. No, there's no distinction there. So it's a distinction within Gaudiya Vaishnava society. It's very pragmatic if we look at it historically. Historically, it's pragmatic. And this is how. Because not all Diksha Gurus in any lineage have proven themselves to be fully qualified in terms, at least in terms of depth of knowledge and depth of realization to share with the Sishas, with the disciples. And so, when this was apparent in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, then this idea was invoked, that rather than you will discard the Diksha Guru, you honor the Diksha Guru who's given the Diksha, and you adopt a Siksha Guru for further advice. It's trying to preserve and keep the Guru system and sensibility and importance of that in place. It was a very pragmatic kind of step that was taken. Interesting. So, but anyway, the point is Siksha Guru, Diksha Guru, they're both supposed to be equally spiritually qualified. It's not that the Diksha Guru is more spiritually qualified. So whoever understands Krishna, you can accept Diksha or Siksha. Now there may be social considerations that are taken into social circumstances that are taken into consideration at a certain time. If, for example, you're in the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Varnashram is the social system, and the Brahmins then are the priests, obviously, and they're giving an initiation within the Karma Marg and so forth, within the Gyan Marg. Then they may, to fit in, defer and say, we'll let those who are qualified amongst them from Brahmin families, they'll be our initiates and so forth. That's a social consideration. It's not a spiritual consideration, but we may override that in the case of an instance of a very special person, perhaps, but you could take into social considerations because you want to pass on the teachings and you have to kind of deal with where the public's at and how they think and so forth. So if there are ways that you can balance the relative and the absolute for the benefit of the public, then you can do that. But that may not be the social system or circumstances in all instances. Time going forward, there's no varnashram system. Democracy is taking over, maybe socialism. we go in the middle. Socialism, you can have friends, but you lose your identity. You have to do what the group does. Capitalism, you can't have any friends, but you can have your individual rugged self. So, Gaudiya Vaishnavism, we have individuality and we have friends at the same time, right? One and different. So it's not meant to be a political system necessarily, but it does encompass the best of both sides of those extremes, if you will. So yeah, so what was the point? So Diksha Guru. Interesting thought on that. Now, did I answer your question or is there a little more to it?
Oh, yeah, that was good. That's the first time I've heard this, that these two terms were only brought up in the Untitled Chapter. There's nothing before then.
You ever see it in Bhagavad Gita?
No.
Is it in the Srimad Bhagavatam?
No.
Is it in the Upanishad? No, it's totally a Gaudiya concept, and it's a nice idea, but yeah, that's a different.
In that, the purport to that verse, Kiba Vipra Kiba Yasi, the purport Prabhupada quotes Bhaktisiddhanta saying it's really important that we accept that. Just like what you said, this means Shiksha Guru, Diksha Guru, you can be.
He says that.
He says if you don't, then our movement of spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world will be stopped unless we accept it. So it makes a really powerful statement, and he's quoting Bhaktisiddhanta's commentary on that verse.
Yeah, because short of that, you have an example of bhakti covered by karma. One thinks, oh, yes, it's very nice that you're a bhakta, but you were born in this family over here, and so we have to take that is going to outweigh your spirituality. You're saying that the karmic situation, let's say from the varnashram perspective, where you're born is your karma, is going to take precedence over your bhakti. And even though you have it, you can't share it in all ways. I mean, it makes no sense. It's a non-spiritual way of thinking, but it's an example of bhakti covered by karma. You know, if you look at Sri Dharma, according to the Manusmriti, there's ways that women are supposed to conduct themselves and so forth. So how does that apply to bhakti? Ask the gopis. Yes.
So, Guru Maharaj, I have a question. The past week or week and a half have been, I feel like you've been condensing so much of the philosophy and.
I thought I was expanding upon it.
Yeah, you were, but you're definitely expanding, but within those windows that you're talking about. So focusing our attention onto those windows that the previous Gaudiya Vaishnavicharyas have given us. So I have two questions, because is there, so what I've heard is that Sakya Ras and Madhurya Ras are the two rasas that the Gaudiya Vaishnavas have given us that portal to enter. So I am wondering, because the Bhagavatam and Goloka Vrindavan have, as you mentioned, the four rasas. So my first question is there an opportunity for the other two, dasya and vatsalya, within the Gaudiya Vaishnavism that we have been granted? And if not, then what other spiritual traditions have Goloka as their sadhya and
Mhm.
those other
Mhm.
processes?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. And do you hear the question, Archon City online? Yes.
Yes.
So the idea is that there are the macrocosmic feature of Guru Tattva in Gaudiya Vaishnavism is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu, Krishna and Balaram, coming in another Leela. Krishna is pursuing Radha's, to experience the vantage point of Radha's love of him. Very peculiar idea. And Balaram's coming to help him do it. This Leela, he gets to participate directly in Madhurya Rasa by speaking about it, glorifying it in ways that he can't in a Braj Leela. Balaram can't openly participate in Krishna's romantic affairs, being the older brother, and caused the Radha to be more respectful in his presence and so forth. So, we know that. So they both, for example, Bande Shri Krishna Chaitanya, they're the pranam, namaskar verse of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Then Krishnadas Kaviraj offices tells us these are the presiding deities in my book, Gaur and Nityananda Prabhu. So, and Chaitanya and Krishna, Nityananda Ram is in Satya Rasa. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu pursuing Madhurya Rasa, Radha. So these are the main currents then. We see that Chaitanya Nityananda Prabhu started with his associates initiating in West Bengal, and they all had lineages of Sakya Rasa. Later then, the lineages of Madhurya Rasa began to develop, coming from Gadadhar and so forth. So these are the main streams. And Sakya Rasa is kind of supportive, just like Nityananda Prabhu was supportive of Mahaprabhu's Gopi Bhav and says, go to him, and so forth. But invariably, or at times, persons will be inspired by Nityananda himself and develop the Sakya Bhav, right? So these are the prominent streams in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And you can look back historically, and that's what you'll find. A particular type of Madhurya Ras, sometimes we call it Manjari Bhav, is most prominent. And secondarily, and in supporting role, we find Sakya Ras, and primarily two types of Sakya Ras. Keval Sakya Ras and the Sakya Ras of the Narmasakas, whose Sakya is mixed with Madhurya. So these are the prominent windows of opportunity that the Sampradaya offers us. Now, at the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, a contemporary of his was Vallabhacharya. Vallabhacharya was connected to the Vishnu Swami Sampradaya. And Vallabha was a very prominent representative of his time, so much so that sometimes it's called the Vallabha Sampradaya. Actually, it's in Vishnu Swami Sampradaya. So this is also a Ragmarg Sampradaya. It's a contemporary of Mahaprabhu's in Vrindavan, very prominent, many followers from Gujarat, the Vallabha Sampradaya. And in his discourse on sadhana bhakti and bhava bhakti, in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami says, after concluding each section, he says, after concluding the section on sadhana bhakti, he says, and there are others who call it Maryada, and it's more or less the same. He's referring to the Vallabha term, Maryada. At the end of his section on Raga Bhakti, Raganuga Bhakti, which he calls it, he said, others, and they call it Pushti, more or less the same. Now, if you look at the Pushti Sampradaya, or excuse me, the Vallabha Sampradaya, the terms, you think, oh, it's completely different. But Rupa Goswami says, more or less the same. which means to say there's relativity to the philosophy. Because philosophy is an attempt to talk about something. In this case, subject is that which is beyond words, beyond thought. So you're trying to explain it. So like, how did Jiva Goswami explain the nature of the Atma? So he gives there's a discussion. Did he say that bhakti was inherent in Jiva or not? Right? That's the current discussion. So all we're trying to do is figure out what Jiva Goswami said, and maybe what Bhakti would know if he said something different. That's all you're trying to figure out. Now, which is right and which is wrong? Well, if there's a difference, you could say, well, the founding acharyas said like this, so that's what they said. That's right in that sense. This is different over here. But we don't need to make necessarily a value judgment on it, necessarily. We could. But if we go to, let's say we go to the Vallabha Sampradaya, which is more or less the same thing, right? And then in Vallabha Sampradaya, they have a gradation of jivas. One of the gradations is samsaran jivas, jivas that never get out of samsara. When we go to Madhva Sampradaya, they have tamasic jivas, rajasic jivas, sattvic jivas. He posited this and tried to support it from the Upanishads because he felt that when it said that God is not to be blamed for the inequalities in the world, that is a result of karma. And when the reply comes, well, what happened at the beginning? He must have started them out on unequal feet. And the scripture said there was no beginning. Next subject. And then your head kind of spins around as it should. Circular. Right? But Madhva felt, yeah, it's true. There is no beginning, but there must be something else that makes the jivas make different choices. Because they're all the same. They would all make the same choices, he thought. Now, I can give an argument against that, but this is how he thought. So therefore, he posited there must be different categories of jivas that make choices within those categories. So there's rajasic jivas, sattvic jivas, tamasic jivas. The sattvic jivas, they'll make the right choices for mukti. And as Krishna says in the Gita, there are some that are life after life, I put them in demonic wombs. They're envious. There you go. So they're samsaran jivas, or tamasic jivas. Now, Gaudiya Vaishnavism typically says all jivas are equal. We like that. Oh, they're all equal. Yeah, that makes sense. Why they make different choices? That's that's a hole you got to fill, right? And that may be troublesome for some. So there's going to be some aspect of the philosophy that just doesn't work for everybody. One little part for another part. That's not a problem for another person, but another person. There's another part that bothers you. So there's a relativity, to the scriptures themselves. It's not when someone in the Vallabha Sampradaya becomes self-realized, they go, oh, Jiva Goswami was right about that. He had it right. We had it a little bit wrong over here. We're talking about things that are beyond words. And so you draw from the Upanishads as the acharyas do and try to support their position on it, what the nature of consciousness is, what the nature of the absolute is. So there's some relativity to it, is the point. It's a point worth taking so that you don't have to think, oh, again, you have to think to be a spiritual person. You have to think about the text and think along these lines as well. So anyway, back to your point, right? I could say this though, in reply to Madhva. Each jiva is equal, but they're individuals. Now you can't be 100% equal and not be the same. So if you're going to say each one is individual and they're all equal, there has to be something that differentiates them at the same time. So in the least, they're differentiated by their subjective experience, which makes them objectively different. So we all experience things differently. We all have will, also will is free, so why we'll choose one thing over another. Anyway, back to your question. During the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Vallabha had his sampradaya, and Mahaprabhu deferred to him. So he has his own sampradaya. And in that sampradaya, vatsalya rasa is prominent. There's also a form of madhurya rasa that's prominent, different than the form we find in Chaitanya Sampradaya, but it is a Rag Marg Sampradaya. So and they make Srimad Bhagavatam the center focus of their scriptural praman. And their goal is to attain Goloka. So Mahaprabhu more or less deferred, in other words, to them. That's to say, they're more set up. And they have examples of people on the ground who have attained this vatsalya rasa. So you'd be better equipped to pursue that, given the way they speak about it, the kind of the type of practice that they engage in, and so on and so forth, which wouldn't be common comparatively within Gaudiya Vaishnavism. We don't have any songs about attaining vatsalya rasa, for example. We don't have examples of sadhus in our line longing for that and sharing their bhav and so forth. Now, the Dimbarka Sampradaya is another Rag Marg Sampradaya. It's also prominent in Vrindavan. They're interested in a particular type of Madhurya Ras, Sakhi Bhav. They want to enter into a section of the Leela in which there's only Sakhi Bhav. There is no Vatsalya. There is no what. They're just in the Kunja, and that's it. Sounds peculiar from our point of view, but you get some scar from that Sampradaya, and you like that idea. So that's one way to think about it, for example. But that isn't to say that somebody couldn't be in Gaudiya Sampradaya and develop vatsalya rasa, which is possible. Gaudiya Vaishnavism has two sides. It's very broad and very deep at the same time. So in terms of its breadth, it can capture people who might have some scar for even Vaikuntha. I've seen that. And in the practice of Nam Sankirtan, can easily take one to Vaikuntha. So they may go, or they may connect with the Ramanuja Sampradaya and get some insight from there, which is the focus to go to Vaikuntha. But so largely speaking, these are the windows of opportunity, maybe some exceptions. Bhaktivinoda Thakur predicted that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Sampradaya, his lineage, will, what did he say? Will, all the lineages, all the other Vaishnava lineages will come under the banner of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And you may think, well, that never happened. But in many respects it has, because other Vaishnava Sampradayas have got an international following largely through the Gaudiya Sampradaya and our particular paribar within the Gaudiya Sampradaya. Prabhupada made a bridge, for this, and they walked across it. People came and made a bridge, chopped down the weeds and whatnot. Temples started growing, and they said, "Hey, let's go." And so now you have even the Vallabha Sampradaya came through the path carved out, if you will, by Gaudiya Sampradaya to come to the west, and Ramanuja a little bit. I don't know about much, but they don't go anywhere. So in that sense, it's actually given voice. It's one of the prominent perspectives of the Gaudiya Sampradaya is that there are other Vaishnava Sampradayas also. It's very inclusive. It says, Krishna is the source of Narayan. Krishna is tu Bhagavan Swayam. But if you want to think of it the other way around, there's a place for that too. It's not where we're going. But in Vaikuntha, they think the other way around. Krishna is an avatar. And that's true from that perspective. We were quite accommodating in that sense. Does that help? All right. What else? Any online questions?
No.
Yes, we have one here.
Correct. Thank you, Guru Maharaj. For a long time, I've wondered how much projection psychological projection we each bring to interpreting some of the philosophy. The main one that I wonder myself sometimes if I'm bringing, and I think maybe others might relate, is this idea of knowing and awareness, such as remembering past lives or being, making a choice at some point as a jiva of where to go. I naturally will project that I'm thinking in English and I'm thinking that this was a choice that I made and I had a conversation or an idea about, that sounds better, let me go do that. And I'd really like to sort of step out of that because it seems contrary to the idea, accepting Srila Prabhupada's idea, his statements, that the human form of life is a particularly special form of life, specifically to realize the soul in this way. And it seems, therefore, that the consciousness that we experience in this specific environment in the human body enables us to do this. Or maybe I'm misinterpreting that aspect and the body has nothing to do with it. And it's really just something to do with association, that we have the association of these Bhagavats that's available here and nowhere else. And so I would like to reconcile that. I wondered if you could offer some insight.
Well, if I understand your question correctly, one response to it might be that sadhus also associate with animals. They don't react in the same way as humans, right? So consciousness is not something that is a product that has a biological, basis to it. It's not. Consciousness is not just a function of the brain. It's ontologically different than the brain. It's ontologically different than the mind too. We have physical matter, we have psychic matter, and then we have consciousness, which is not matter, right? That's our perspective. And it's a good one. Now, that said, while consciousness is not dependent on matter, matter is dependent on consciousness for it to have value, for it to have meaning, purpose. It is a driving force. Scientists will look and say, well, we don't see it. We see electrical energy, we see strong, weak nuclear force. We don't see consciousness doing anything, right? Well, some things go unseen. Yeah, that's true. Even if we look at consciousness just as a witness, some things only happen because someone's watching. But it's more than a witness. It is a doer, but they're looking for how consciousness moves matter in terms of the physical force. So it's presumed from the start that it's has to be a physical force. They used to think that way about gravity too. When Newton first said, to come up with this gravity, they thought the guys would be coming back to the occult. Because we know that if things only move if something moves, if two physical things touch, then there's movement. He's saying there's movement without anything physical touching. It sounds like, to use a term of Einstein, what did he say? Spooky? Spooky. He's talking about form time. A little spooky, I don't know. So you often hear these scientists, nothing spooky now. I'm not saying anything like that. It's a bad thing, something. As if the fact that there's a mystery to life is a bad thing. But as if there's something beyond the ken of human intelligence that we can't know. Nothing says about it, from the point of view a Darwinian evolutionary perspective, that humans should be able to understand everything. That's not part of the teaching. And we actually live for the mystery. That's what accepts us. So it's not that consciousness is a biological product, or that it's just a function of the brain. But matter does shape consciousness in terms of its ability to express itself. And that shaping that's done is actually instigated by consciousness itself, which acts in a particular way in relation to nature, and nature responds accordingly. I'm speaking about karma. So you get a body, that means a shape, right? And that shape shapes the consciousness. In other words, it limits or facilitates whatever the extent to which consciousness can express itself. Let's say you have two vehicles. Let's say a Volkswagen and a BMW. Well, they both have a gas pedal. You could step on the floor it on either one, but the Volkswagen is not going to go as fast as the BMW, right? So depending on the vehicle you have, the shape in which you're in, which is you didn't know that you are the body, right? You've heard that you're not the body. I'm going to tell you, you are the body. Not that. But what I mean by that is that the body represents your consciousness, and you are your consciousness. So you are your body. How about that? It is an expression of your consciousness. Now you change your consciousness, you change your shape. And there's a shape to praying that consciousness also. Because praying is love in relation to Krishna. That form will be eternal. So point being that, and I don't know if I'm answering your question, but this is what comes to mind in hearing it, that yes, the human form of life, it facilitates consciousness in ways that less complex forms of life don't. In the human form of life, we have a pressing question that does not arise in the less complex forms of life. There you have questions like how to eat, how to sleep, how to make, how to defend, for example. In human life, we have one bigger question, and that is why. Why? Meaning, value, purpose. This is like, give you a big head, right? And that means that consciousness, which is a unit of value, meaning, purpose, gives purpose to matter. Without consciousness reflecting on matter, if matter mattered, independent of consciousness, who would know about it? Who would care? Consciousness is the knower, the carer, the feeler, and so on and so forth. Right? So consciousness, and the idea is, according to Vedanta, in the human form of life, this consciousness is coming to the fore more than it is in the less complex forms of life, and it's asking about itself. Why? Why am I? And it just feels like the physical world is just not quite big enough for us. We need to keep making it bigger. We have to go sail across the ocean. We have to go to Mars. Moon didn't have any virtues. So we had to go further. There are cows on Mars. Something like that. So or we have to go faster, or we have to do it better. We have to always exceed the limitations that previously we thought were the limits. And then when we do, even if it's by a fraction of a second, we get a gold medal and everybody's celebrating it. So human life is constantly celebrating these extents to which we exceed or transcend the boundaries that previously we thought were the limitations. But still we don't fit. We're very small, but we're not big enough. We're too big for the world. We're a tiny atomic particle of consciousness, but we're too big for the world. We don't fit. We try to expand the world and make it bigger to fit, but it will never fit. We go to the moon, or let's say we go to Mars, but what were we looking for? We're looking for ourselves. I haven't found it. And you could have done it for free, right? Just live in a cave and found it. You didn't have to go that far. So this is the idea of Vedanta. So human life, we feel like we should be able to fly in the sky like birds. We feel like we should be able to go to the bottom of the ocean like some fish. Birds aren't thinking, I wish I could go to the bottom of the ocean. Fish aren't thinking, I wish I could fly, Maybe some jump a little bit, but try to capture the moon or something. It's a big fish. So, but humans think like that. That's the self speaking. It's not limited. and they're feeling it. But we pursue it in ways which will not be fruitful. But the point is, relative to your question, as I understand it, yes, the human life does facilitate pursuing the more that we are, both as ourself, as a unit of consciousness, and its potential to have a relationship with its source, Bhagwan. So in human life, if we have, therefore, what does Gaudiya Vaishnavism say? In his poem, Dulabha manava janama satsange tara e bhava sindure. Dulabha manava janama. To get manava janama, human life, the dulabha, very rare. I mean, there are more species on the end of my finger than there are on the planet in human form. In germ, microbic, species. There's more here than there are human. We are maybe heading towards extinction. Comparatively, we're a very, very small group. So it's, the Vedas say, Dulabha Manava. The human birth is very rare. So if you get this, very fortunate. Pujapachita Maharaj, my Siksha Guru, one of my godbrothers sitting with him on the veranda, where he would sit for a couple hours in the morning, in the afternoon, answer our foolish questions with answers that make us forget our questions, and try to live in the answers. He said, Guru Maharaj, today's a very inauspicious day. And Guru Maharaj said, what is that? He said, today is my birthday. I was born in this body. I'm embodied. Guru Maharaj said, oh, very auspicious. He said, Jalaja Navalakshani Stavarlaksha Vimshati Krimevudu. The verse from the Purana, there are this many thousand species of aquatics, this many thousand species of reptiles, this many birds, this many beasts, and Chatur Lakshani Manav. 4 lakhs of types of humans. Exactly what they mean, I'm not sure, but there are a few varieties of us types. But comparatively, very rare. So he was making the point: you've got a human birth that's very rare. That's half the equation. So Dula Manava Janama Satsange. You add human life and satsanga. Taraha e Bhava Sindhu. The Bhava Sindhu, the ocean of material existence, you can cross over very easily, these two combined. That is the purpose of human life, therefore, we say, to pursue sadhusanga and subsequently to apply ourselves according to the teachings that they exemplify in sadhus, and they explicitly teach by way of reference to the sacred texts, the prominent form of revelation, the answer to why. We are the question, why? And the answer comes, this is why. Why am I? The sacred text, this is why you are, and this is why you're human life, this is your purpose, and so forth, and what to do. It's a conversation. Revelation is part of a conversation between humanity and the Godhead. So it's ongoing. It's dynamic in nature. It's so both. Right. All right. What else? What time is it?
It is 12:34, and we have 2 questions in the chat if you are up for going over.
Okay. What are they? One of them.
Okay, the first one is from Indranuja, and it is, I was wondering about initiation and the difference between first and second. It would appear in ISKCON first is heavily emphasized, even to the point where many gurus say you don't need second unless you're on the altar. So could you please address this, please?
That was a term that Prabhupada used, second initiation, first initiation. He would give Harinam, he would give the Maha Mantra to his disciples, ask them to chant them as beads, prescribed number of rounds and so forth. And at the time, as their understanding became more developed and their commitment and so forth, then he would give them what's technically called mantra diksha. So they would impart the diksha mantra. Harinam is not typically a diksha mantra. It is simply a combination of names of God. The name of God has the power to deliver us. It's not different from God. So it's even independent of diksha. But if we think, therefore I'll just chant Krishna's name, I don't need a guru. Why should I bother with that? Seems rather onerous. Of course, if you're thinking like that, you don't have to have a guru, that's true. But you aren't going to get the fruits of chanting the name, because one of the offenses to the name is to disrespect the principle of the guru, whose Krishna has invested. Bhakti has invested herself in them to be the agents to give the name, which is where we got it from some devotee, right? From sadhus, and to exemplify the teaching and so forth. So if we disrespect the principle of guru and think I'll go without a guru, we'll be making offense to the name. So we should have a guru who should bless us to chant the holy name and who teach us by example. And it's not a law. It said you must have a guru in the Upanishads. Tasmad gurum, what is that verse? There's a different verse. One must have a guru. I don't look at it like a law, but I look at it like that because we learn from sadhu sangha about bhakti. In the context of that sadhu sangha, some sadhu will stand out to us and we'll feel, I must have him or her as my guru. I feel it. When he speaks, it resonates with me. It's like, yeah, I feel I would have liked to have said it like that. He's putting it in words, but I couldn't. It's not a foreign thing, foreign like opposition. It feels familiar in a way that it resonates. I feel like I must. And the girl said, no. Oh, I must. No. Something like that. It's usually the other way around. No. Oh, you must. No, you must. So this we should command by our, we should teach. What does it say? We should command respect by the way we conduct ourselves. Not that we should command respect. I'm a guru. Who says? I said. So all kinds of things lend themselves to abuse. But therefore, yes, we should chant the Hare Krishna mantra. And, you can chant now, anytime, but I mean, we should naturally, if we want to take advantage of that, seek out good guidance and find a sadhu in whom we can repose our faith. And who we should be, this should be our worry, our only anxiety, that someone of spiritual consequence is thinking about me, cares about me. I want a connection with such a person. It's not what you know, it's who you know. It's not even what, it's also not what you know, it's how much you're willing to learn. It determines how wise you are. So, Harinam, we call it initiation, something like that. That's probably called the first initiation. Now, having gotten that, what's the need for the second initiation or the Diksha mantra? Well, that is also consisting of Krishna's names, but it's in a particular formula that serves to foster what we call Sharanagati, submission to the absolute and so forth. And so the main Diksha mantra in our Sampradaya is the Gopal mantra, found in Gopal Tapani Upanishad. That's what sheds light, Gopal Tapani, on Gopal. This is his mantra. So this is our mantra. It's an 18-syllable mantra. It's the mother of all Krishna mantras, if you will. There are 10-syllable versions, 12-syllable versions. But our Sampradaya, this is the Diksha mantra. So that mantra will help us to take advantage of the name of Krishna, which we're already chanting. So if that will help us, how can we possibly say, I don't think I need help? It's okay, but I don't think I need that help. We should think whatever help I can get, I will take, right? So it's very important. Now there are other mantras that sometimes different gurus may give at the time of Diksha also, like may give a guru mantra, Guru Gayatri, Kam Gayatri, Gaur mantra, Gaur Gayatri, these are common. Gadadhar Gayatri, there may be different paribhara to the lineages within our Gaudiya Sampradaya may add. But this is the main mantra. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu chanted the 10-syllable version. Gopakumar and Bhagavatamrita also. So it's not the mantra that is imparted is also employed in archan, in worshiping the deity. So there's a mantra form of the deity. So when one is engaged in archan, in seva puja of the deity of Krishna, then the Diksha mantra will also be invoked in different procedures and so forth. So without that, it's thought, therefore, you cannot do the archan. But the mantra is not only for the purpose of allowing someone to do archan, as I'm saying. It has a bigger scope to it. Therefore, it said, what in Chaitanya Charitamrita, what is that verse? Krishna mantra, samsara mochan. Yeah, Krishna nam, Krishna charan. I forget all the words in between, but samsara mochan. Samsara mochan means to get freedom from samsara. The Krishna mantra means the Diksha mantra is for that. And Krishna mantra, Krishna nam, takes you to the feet of Krishna. So Pujapat Sridhar Maharaj explained this, gave it as a graphic. There's two circles, one circle, large circle, and a smaller circle. The large circle is Harinam, the Nam Mahamantra, because that extends down to anybody. There's no qualification other than your faith. Shadavam Janohe Shadavam. He said, Mahaprabhu said, open the marketplace to give out the holy name. And what was the price? Only your Shraddha. You don't need to be celibate. You don't need to be free from desire. All the qualifications necessary for Astanga Yoga or Jnana, just your faith in Nam. Take it. So it goes down to anybody. Doesn't matter what caste you're from, what gender you're from, what country you're from, so forth. And Krishna Nam goes all the way to Krishna Charan, to the feet of Krishna. Because in Goloka, they're also chanting Krishna Nam. Ram Nam, Ram Ram, Mahabhavu. Many instances. Every day coming back from the cows, there's Nam Sankirtan. Coming back with the cows, Krishna and his friends. And the villagers here, and they come participate. So, inside that bigger circle is a smaller circle. And this is the range of the Diksha mantra. It doesn't go down as low. It's shared with someone who has qualified themselves by chanting the Harinam at the discretion of Gurudev. And then he sees, oh, it's your student understanding better. It says, now maybe capable, a little more capable for participating in other services, we understand, like Archan, for example. That's maybe a factor, but not the whole thing. So then you give the Diksha mantra. The Diksha mantra then helps the conditioned soul, as mentioned in Bhakti Sandarbha, to come to the point of samsara moksha, which means Swarup Siddhi in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Swarup Siddhi. And then its efficacy is reached, leaves off, and goes. Harinam takes the rest away. Let me give you an example. In Brihad Bhagavatamrita, the protagonist is Gopakumar. He chants his Diksha mantra. He goes everywhere, right? He goes all the way to Dwarka. There he meets Nard again and Uddhava. And Uddhava instructs him, go back to Braj on earth and do Nam Kirtan and of your favorite names of Krishna and Leela Smarnam. So then he goes there and he's not chanting his mantra anymore. Very prominent feature of the whole book is he chants his mantra and he goes to Siddhalok. He chants mantra, he goes to Brahmalok. He chants mantra, he goes to Vaikuntha. He goes to Ayodhya. He goes to Dwarka. This is called Kram Mukti, going from one place to the next, step by step by step. It's a teaching. But to follow the teaching. In Dwarka, he wanted to go to Braj. He didn't go out. And Uddhava sent him back to earth in Braj and said, do Nam Kirtan. Then he chanted his mantra anymore. The mantra had reached its efficacy. He attained Swarup Siddhi. Then he continued with Nam Sankirtan and that took him to the Loka. Haribol.
Oh.
So I think you want that mantra and you want that. Okay, what else?
Okay, this question was from Bhakti Ross. She thought it might be a little complex for the end of the class, so you can decide. Just that you had mentioned that Gaudiya Vaishnavism is broad and can accommodate different perspectives. Is there room to accommodate both that bhakti is inherent and gifted?
Well, Bhakti Vinod Thakur made statements to the effect that it was inherent. He was a gifted person. So I think that that there are the main emphasis in both cases is that in order for one to attain Prem Bhakti, one needs sadhu sangha. So Bhakti Vinod may have taught in a certain way in his time, given the circumstances, emphasized in a certain way that was different from the way that Jiva Goswami wrote about it. Jiva Goswami had a very sharp pencil while he was writing. Bhakti Vinod Thakur was trying to elaborate on what he said and make it accessible to common people. Sandarbhas weren't written for common people. They were written for theologians. Massive people are not theologians. So I really believe that we see that Bhakti Vinod put his teachings in a novel, form of a novel, and he's trying to cover a lot of ground. You know, for example, in Jiva Dharma, he's trying to cover many texts. He's trying to cover the Sandarbhas. The last part's all from Ujjwal and Ilmani, and he's just ripping through it, you know, compared to the time that's taken and all the commentaries written on, for example, Ujjwal and Ilmani and how large the Sandarbhas are. He's obviously giving a condensed form of it, and in a way that's accessible to people who aren't theologians. So he may have chosen to talk about it in a way that sounds like it's different than Jiva Goswami talked about it, but you can look at a number of his statements seem to correspond entirely, others seem a little different. So in that sense, yes, he seemed to think so, and he was successful. But you're asking, does one have to figure it all out and know exactly? And some might, some may not. Depends what you're like. But if you know that you need sadhusanga, this is the very janma of bhakti. It's born from that. It will grow from that. And a strong sanskar for that, to take advantage of sadhusanga. Then it shouldn't be much of a problem, and you probably don't even think about it. So it's again, it's a theological point. I mean, it's the way Jiva Goswami makes the point is pretty clear. But again, I can write with a really sharp pencil. And most people are I guess, not theologians. It's true that the Baba will arise out of tattva. So it's important to know the tattva. There's an article coming from Bhaktivinoda called Brahma Tattva, which says confusion about the philosophy is an art that gets in the way of one's progress. But if you read carefully, where he says that, what he describes as examples, they're very broad. They're broad, like you think chanting the name of Krishna, chanting the name of Kali, they're all names of God. So it's the same. You guys got that one down, right? So we're not talking about real fine-tuned theology. So Bhaktivinoda may have taken some liberties there, given the time in which he was, where sometimes they were selling swarups, and gurus were not conducting themselves in ways that they should have in the Gaudiya Sampradaya. But to come to me and say, just chant, it's in the heart of it. Come on. That may have been something the way he was thinking when he spoke like that. It's possible. Others may have other ways of trying to harmonize it, but I would say, given the way in which the issue becomes, it has become a little bit of what would you call it? Divisive. It might be better to speak about it in ways that tones it down within reason, without compromising on some understanding. I mean, you go into it real deep, you kind of go in circles. If you say, in a broad sense, bhakti is inherent because the swarup of the jiva is to be a das of Krishna. Therefore, everyone has a destiny to be a servant of Krishna. And Krishna knows everything, so you must know what your service would be. So it must be already predestined. In that sense, it must be inherent. Someone will say, well, if it was like that, then there would be, what would you probably say, partiality. So, okay, we'll put it in the hands of Bhakti. Bhakti gives Bhakti. She must know. She gives the Bhakti, but she only does what Krishna wants. And then you go around and around a little bit. But I think it's very clear, and something that has become clear to a lot of devotees on this issue in times recently where it came up in the international community of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, that bhakti, which is constituted the Swarup Shakti, is not part of the constitution of the jiva, which is the way in which some people were interpreting some of the things that Bhaktivinoda said. So even he who is now the loudest spokesperson for championing what Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, says, oh, that's not what he meant, which is how a lot of people took it to be. So that one has been cleared up. The Swarup Shakti, which is Krishna's internal energy, that bhakti is constituted of, is the essence of, that is not part of the constitution of the jiva, but the jiva will imbibe that by sadhusanga. So, some clarity. Leave it at that. Does that help? Well, it's all help I can get this morning.
Help me. It was good.
Big subject, as Bhakti Ras has acknowledged. Anyway, nice to sit with all of you online and off, and I hope you're back online for more questions next week and back here again sooner than later.
Jai.
Or Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Anantakoti Vaishnavindagi.
We took a quick group photo,
Okay, where?
just right there.
Okay. I can-
We're gonna take a quick, today's Guru Maharaj's last day here, so we're gonna get a quick photo.
Okay, I'm going to stop the streaming. So devotees, I'm just going to make a quick announcement.